You can't sit in silence for more than 2 minutes, then there's something wrong with you. And it's not your fault. It's more society's fault than anything. But in this video, we're going to talk a little bit about meditation and many of the things that most people struggle with when it comes to meditation and how to rectify that. I myself have meditated almost 40,000 minutes of my life. It's about a month of my life in meditation. I study and practice Theravada Buddhism as well as Dhammic practices. And in my studies, I have learned a lot of ancient traditions, and I've spoken to many different monks and learned from many different teachers of ancient Buddhist and Dhammic practices that can really, really amplify your meditation practice. So if you struggle with losing focus, if you struggle with too many thoughts, if you struggle with resistance during meditation, not finding the time to do so, I've learned many different ways to take that and make it so much easier and turn it from a stressful or resistance-inducing situation to make it effortless, to make it flow, and to make it more organic so it comes naturally and that you actually want to meditate, and also to come in a way that feels more forgiving. So the first thing that I'd like to discuss when it comes to problems with meditation is where you meditate. Now, the great thing about meditation is you can meditate anywhere. But there is something very, very powerful about having a ritual and having a space. Typically myself, I like to meditate in this room. I actually have a meditation cushion right here. And this is where I will go to meditate. Now, that doesn't mean I can't meditate in other places, but if you're struggling with some sort of resistance, try setting a time of day as well as a place to do so, a sacred space. It can help also to get in the mood. You may light some candles, put on some meditation music, although this is not needed, can be helpful. And also remember that when you are in this space and when you take the time to meditate, you're meditating for yourself without expectation, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a minute. But it's important to acknowledge that you're doing this for yourself and for your family and friends down the line, because you end up being a happier person when you meditate consistently. But you're doing this for yourself, and in order to do that, you need to recognize that and take a moment before beginning your practice to just acknowledge that you're showing up for yourself, paying attention to what you're doing as you're doing it or before you even do it is very, very helpful for any task rather, but specifically for meditation. The second thing that I find people struggle with is the resistance enigma. This resistance enigma can appear at any moment during a meditative practice, and it is incredibly important that you understand this enigma for what it is. So typically, if I find myself having any sort of resistance in my meditation practice, I do one of a few things. One, I simply recognize it for what it is, but I also recognize that this resistance is impermanent, as all things are, as we are taught in the Dhammic practices. And this is incredibly important because there are going to be times where you sit down to meditate and you love it. You have these blissful experiences. You are so happy. You are so at peace. You walk out of that practice with a big smile on your face. But then there are other times when it's a bit more frustrating or very frustrating, to the point where you physically feel like you need to launch out of your meditative position and go do something else. So it's important that we just recognize that first off, this resistance is always going to be changing. It is fluid. It may be here at times like an enigma that just appears, or it may be hidden and gone for some time. The second way that we deal with this resistance enigma is just by noticing it. Simply notice the experience for what it is. You feel resistance. And instead of reacting to that resistance, recognize that the resistance has arisen. Resistance has arisen. The great thing is we can use this practice for any feeling whatsoever, whether it's anger, happiness, sadness, grief. It has arisen. And just as all things arise, it must cease. This is what the Buddha taught us, and this is what we can implement into our practice every single day. Thirdly and finally, some people that I have heard struggle with meditation practices, specifically regarding which meditations to apply. I would say apply any meditation that calls to you. And if you're just starting out, it's great to explore with many different meditative practices. But eventually, you'll land on one that you resonate with the most. And so when I say whatever meditation practice calls to you, I mean in the beginning of you beginning this practice, what calls to you. In the beginning for me, for that first year where I meditated every single day, I would do one of two types of practices. Guided meditations, where somebody would walk me through imagining a ball of light coming into my body, let's say. And then other types of practices where I would just sit with a little bit of music or the sounds of water. And each day could be a bit different, especially when you first start out. It's kind of like working out at the gym. Some days you want to do arms and shoulders, and other days you want to do legs. But eventually, over time, I encourage you to try to narrow in on one practice. So with this gym analogy, we'd be narrowing in on a full body workout. It's super important, in my opinion, to narrow in, because when we narrow in, that's when we really start to have these amazing epiphanies. Many of the great teachers that I've learned from say, it doesn't necessarily matter which meditation practice you pick, but eventually once you pick it, try to stick with it. It would be attuned to trying to learn 5 different languages at once and jumping around each time, and you're barely getting started with one before you move to the next. So let me know if those were helpful in those tips. Those are 3 meditation problems and their solutions. Feel free to leave any comments below as well. I teach Theravada on this page, as well as teach you how to be more at peace with yourself and with others. If you have any questions about Buddhist cosmology, where do we come from, why are we here, what did the Buddha say about that, or anything of that nature, feel free to leave the comments below. And my goal with this page is to teach people the Dhamma and to teach people the truth of suffering, and that we don't need to suffer so much. Also considering starting a podcast, so if that sounds of interest to you, please let me know. Again, I'm looking for support in this endeavor because it is a bit time consuming and a bit tedious. And social media, if I could be a bit open to you right now, it can be a bit frustrating, specifically when you post online and some videos do better than others, and you constantly have to appease that algorithm. And so at times I do question how effective the work I'm doing on this page is to others. So any words of encouragement is always appreciated, but not necessary. It in itself, that feeling that I just described to you is simply a passing moment of existence. It will arise just to cease. With that being said, I'm actually going to meditate for a second here. May you be well and free of suffering, my friend. Thanks for watching.